And I spoke to one of the leading biologists in the world in India 3 months ago. After reviewing more than 600 scientific journals, he concluded that a significant factor causing the increase in bad health in the United States is genetically engineered foods. In Brazil right now, the approval process is a facade. It is not competent to identify most of the risks that we have identified in the book Genetic Roulette, 65 risks, linking GMOs to toxic and allergic reactions in humans, damage to virtually every organ and every system in lab animals, and thousands of livestock that have sterility or reproductive problems or death. And so I say this technology has the capacity to be one of the most dangerous technologies deployed on Earth because it's fed to everyone in the population and released into the environment where it can never be recalled. If the United States Department of Agriculture, in a 2006 report, said that GMOs do not increase yield, do not increase farmer income. In many cases, they lower yield and lower income. So they raised the question, we should study why so many farmers are adopting this technology when there's no apparent benefit. Recently, the Catholic Church declared that genetic modification is a modern sin. I gave a talk to another religion, and they started creating GM-free churches. In India, in a 30-minute anti-GMO documentary, 2 spiritual leaders with more than 300 million followers described GM as poison. Now, many of the religious organizations, including the World Council on Churches, have statements against GMOs. I'm not against genetic engineering as a science per se. I'm not against human gene therapy. I'm not against using genetic engineering to produce medicine or to study the DNA. But right now, we're feeding the products of an infant science to billions of people and releasing them into the environment where they can never be recalled. The process of genetic engineering is fraught with unpredicted side effects. The Food and Drug Administration... There is a known allergen in soy called trypsin inhibitor. And in non-GMO soy, when you cook it, it breaks down quite a bit and becomes non-allergenic. In Monsanto's own study, they found that with cooked GM soy, the trypsin inhibitor did not break down. It was as much, not as much, it was as much as 7 times higher than the non-GM soy. Let me talk first about this particular corn that's approved in Brazil and not in Germany. When the Italian government fed this corn to mice, the mice had an immune response. When the Austrian government fed this to mice, the more the mice ate the corn, the less babies they had, and the smaller the babies were. A variety of this corn was responsible probably for people getting allergic type reactions from breathing the pollen. People claim that this variety has caused damage to their animals. I think what's happening in Europe is that there has been a very strong lobby to promote GMOs there. But when people start thinking about planting it on their own soil, they realize they are now contaminating the non-GM varieties because corn easily cross-pollinates. Studies also show damage to the soil, so it could create problems with soil fertility. So when people think, it's in my neighborhood, then they become very clear and realize this is a decision that's irreversible. We need to go slow. So I'm very happy. Unfortunately, many of the scientists who discover adverse findings have been fired, stripped of responsibilities, forced out, threatened. I talked at the European Parliament recently with a scientist from the Russian National Academy of Sciences. And she had done a study in which she found that most of the babies of female rats that were fed GM soy died within 3 weeks, compared to only 10% death rate if they ate non-GM soy. And she also showed pictures to the European Parliament, the testicles of rats that changed color when they were fed GM soy. And the Italian researchers found evidence of changes in the sperm cells and the embryos. As far as the conspiracy goes, I would say Monsanto's stated goal was to genetically engineer 100% of all the commercial seeds in the world and patent them. And they have developed a very powerful marketing program that has not been allowing the independent scientific evidence to stop them. even if you inserted a gene that had the most fantastic nutritional qualities, the very process of inserting a single gene can change the natural functioning of hundreds or thousands of other genes in the DNA. So it might create new allergens, which is what happened with GM soy and corn. It might create things that are associated with Parkinson's disease, which might also be associated with GM soy. So we have a very primitive technology where we take genes and shoot it by a gun into a plate of cells and then clone those cells into plants, hoping that some of the massive collateral damage in the plant does not create harmful effects in humans. But we don't even evaluate all those changes. And so today, the current generation of GMOs is unsafe. Maybe in the future we can do it right. We don't have to say, I'll drink a pesticide and avoid a GMO. I will say this. The GMOs have more pesticide residues on them. In fact, in Brazil, the government had to increase many-fold the allowable residue level of pesticide. So we don't have to make that choice. But I'll tell you one thing that will be very interesting to consumers. The corn and cotton planted in Brazil that's genetically engineered produces its own pesticide to break open the stomach of insects and kill them. The only human feeding study ever conducted on GMOs, only one and published, shows that the genes from GMOs, in this case it was soy, transferred into the bacteria living inside our intestines and continued to function. Now what this means is, if you eat a corn chip that's made from genetically engineered corn that produces its own pesticide, if the gene transfers into the bacteria inside your intestine, it might transform it into a living pesticide factory, possibly for the rest of your life. So you might have continuous exposure from inside. When I talk about this at medical conferences, time and time again, doctors respond by saying, since GMOs were introduced in the United States, we have seen, in my practice, they say, a huge increase in gastrointestinal problems. Maybe it's this toxin, and maybe it's the problems with gut bacteria. The biotech industry does not want to do environmental studies.
Se o senhor me permite complementar, a informação no Ministério do Meio Ambiente é que a Presidência da República tomou essa decisão porque a empresa que produz o glifosato no Brasil ameaçava cancelar um investimento de $600 milhões se não fosse autorizado o plantio.
This is typical.